Thanks, Tim. Yes, we completed a capital raise last week, and which has now gone into settlement. We raised a placement of 175 million from sophisticated and institutional investors, and we have a share purchase plan out that was in fact launched. That will be launched on Monday for our existing retail shareholder base as well. So just a summary about the company. So we are actually a commercial stage company. We received approval for our first product, which is a product for an imaging product for managing prostate cancer. It was approved by the TGA and the FDA last year, and we're in the final stages of getting approval for that in Europe and Canada, and also pursuing its approval in other countries as well. So really an exciting time for the business as we progress towards becoming an earnings-based company. It's a rather rare event in life sciences companies. As you mentioned, capital raise, notwithstanding the sort of challenging market conditions, we did a very credible job of raising capital in a difficult environment and with very good support from domestic and overseas fund managers. And what this does is it enables the company to really take its opportunities to the next level in terms of we have 2 more products to put into a regulatory approval process this year, one for renal cancer, one for brain cancer. We have a global phase 3 trial that's just starting now in prostate cancer. That's a therapeutics program. And we do have some aspirations over the next 12 months to also expand our pipeline a little bit. So as the first products go to approval and go to market, we want to then start to backfill that pipeline as well, so that 5 years down the track, when our current pipeline is commercialized, that we've got the innovation momentum to continue to create value for shareholders. Moving on to the next slide, Jake. So this is a sort of high-level snapshot of the business. Notwithstanding that we are newly in product approval territory, we have been operating at a commercial scale. We delivered over 12,000 doses of clinical trial doses and prostate cancer imaging product last year. We have a ton of clinical activity, which I'll show you in a second. We're clinically active, in many countries around the globe, about 30 countries around the globe. And what we've built over the last few years, we became a publicly traded company on the ASX in November of 2017. And what we've done is we've built a global supply chain and logistics platform that really enables us to get these products all over the planet. And that's a really interesting challenge because radiopharmaceuticals, don't have to know too much about radioactivity, except that we all know that it decays over time. Some of these products have an astonishingly short shelf life, and so we have to just-in-time manufacture them. So that means that in addition to doing drug development, very sophisticated drug development, we also have to manage a manufacturing and supply chain that is really unique for this class of products. Moving on to the next slide. So in terms of what MTR is, and Tim, your comment about being a mouthful is a perfectly reasonable one, but what we do is we develop targeted radiation. And essentially what that is we develop molecules or drugs that bind or hit a particular signature on a cancer cell that's unique to that type of cancer. And we attach to it, we tether to that molecule a radioactive payload. So these are systemic injections. That's an IV injection into your arm. And then these molecules whiz around your body, and wherever they encounter a cancer cell, they deposit their radioactive payload. Sometimes we attach a small amount of radiation and we get imaging. So we put a patient into a thing called a PET scanner. This is a very commonly available medical device. It exists in all cancer hospitals, at least in most of the major markets. And what that'll do is it'll give you an image from your toes to your nose, everywhere where that target is expressed. And it's incredibly useful for oncologists to stage and manage patients, and particularly for some of the diseases that Telix targets. And then what we do is we change the dose to a therapeutic dose. We increase that level of radioactivity, and then we treat patients. We essentially treat that scan. So this is the ultimate example of a personalized or precision medicine strategy, in the sense that we, as we call it here, we see the disease and then we treat it in a very personalized way. Next slide, please. So at a macro level, what our vision is as a company is today, or historically, radiation has been an incredibly important part of cancer care. I don't think there's anybody that isn't touched by cancer. And if you've ever had a loved one or yourself that's had cancer, you'll know that radiation therapy is a very important pillar of cancer care alongside surgical and pharmaceutical interventions. And what our vision is as a company is that 10 years from now, any cancer application where you are developing, any cancer application where you would traditionally use radiation, instead of sitting in the basement of a hospital in a big machine called a linear accelerator, which sort of shoots high energy X-rays at your body and it irradiates the tumor externally with a fair bit of collateral damage caused in the process, we go from a box, that very expensive capital equipment, workflow, complicated workflow, big hospital real estate type of environment. We get rid of all of that and replace it with a shot, an injection that does exactly the same thing, actually arguably with greater efficacy, because instead of just shooting radiation at things that we can detect, this has the ability to deliver even microscopic disease irradiation dose as well. So it's a very effective way of delivering radioactivity to cancer patients. Next slide, please. So this is our pipeline. I'm not going to go through it in a ton of detail, except to note that we have mostly a very late stage program. Our imaging agents tend to precede our therapeutic programs because the clinical trials are more straightforward and faster. As I mentioned in my opening comments, we have one product approved already in some countries, including the US as a major market. And this year we expect to make 2 more product filings as well. This will generate a multi-product revenue stream for the company as we sort of transition to this earnings-based funding model. And then we have a number of therapy programs that are coming in behind, notably in prostate cancer, in renal cancer, and an aggressive type of cancer called glioblastoma, which is a brain cancer. And we published some of our preliminary results last year, very encouraging clinical data, albeit early stage and still more clinical development needed, but very encouraging preliminary data. We also, we've built Telix through M&A and licensing. So we are always looking for opportunities to expand our dominance. Telix is one of the largest and best established companies in this field globally. So we acquired a Swiss-German company named TheraPharm last year with an interesting product in bone marrow conditioning. This is basically before you have a bone marrow transplant. This is a way of essentially removing your bone marrow so that you can accommodate a donor transplant. And we think that this will lead to a safer way of doing that. At the moment, the chemotherapy approaches that are used are quite toxic and have a high morbidity and mortality rate, and are not suitable, for example, for pediatric patients or for patients that are more elderly. So we see the opportunity to really open up that space to a wider variety of clinical applications. Moving on to the next slide, what you'll see here is, and so whilst the previous slide sort of showed the major disease indications that we are working on, prostate, renal, and glioblastoma, what this slide also shows you strategically where Telix is going. We, although those first indications are really important and they've been very carefully chosen, many of our products have opportunities in other indications as well. So we are demonstrating this concept of targeted radiation in breast cancer. We're looking at bladder cancer. We see all kinds of follow-on applications for the technology. And so this is, if you like, this is your laminated roadmap above your desk of all of the clinical activity that we're undertaking around the globe. And I think it's fair to say there are not that many companies that are really comprehensively demonstrating what this technology is going to be able to do for oncology care. So it's a really exciting summary of what our prospects are and the disease areas that we're going to be able to influence in the future. Next slide, please. So in terms of 2022 and beyond, this capital raise was clearly a major inflection point for the company. It was clearly understood by the market that we needed to raise capital in order to make this transition to an earnings-based company, because we need a strong balance sheet to kick off these very large global clinical trials. So the Prostate phase 3 trial, which is now starting in Australia and will extend globally, is a sort of a $60 million, $70 million investment over the next few years. And also to be able to be effective in developing partnerships for our assets, we absolutely need to be able to have a strong balance sheet. So that was critically important. We're focused right now on the Illuccix rollout in the United States in particular. probably 85% of our revenue over the next 12 months will come from the US. So super critical. Commercializing our diagnostics program, advancing, as I showed you on the pipeline slide, our core therapy programs, and then expanding our pipeline. So really, very clear focus for 2022 in terms of that commercial transition. Next slide, please. Launch of Illuccix in the US is in good shape. We're just finalizing our inventory following the FDA approval just before Christmas. And in the first half of this year, that will be complete. And then in Q2, you'll really see the launch rollout on a larger scale way. We've got our reimbursement in play. Reimbursement is vital for commercial launch in the US. So that's our next big challenge after FDA approval. We've built out an excellent network of centers that have our product readily available. And so a really strong launch expected for this product and very high and unmet need for this product in prostate cancer staging and prostate cancer management. Next slide, please. Renal cancer program, this will be our second approval from the company's internal efforts. We're finishing a global phase 3 trial right now called the Zircon study. It's 90% recruitment, so that's a big commercial milestone coming up that we're really excited to bring to the market. That will finish recruitment probably late next month or maybe in March. And then a couple of months later, we'll have a top line readout. So around a mid-year readout for that clinical trial. Game changer in managing kidney cancer. I'm really excited to present the results of that study. Next slide, please. And then just in terms of the third focus area, it's really our prostate cancer therapy program. It consists of 3 clinical trials to explore different utility of this product, but the primary one is the global phase 3 trial. And as I said, that's kicking off in Australia now and progressing to the rest of the world over the next 6 months. Last slide, and then I'll wrap it up for questions. So we accomplished a great deal in the last quarter with our first product approval in the US. With commencement of recruitment for our prostate cancer therapy programs. It's really a major milestone to be able to deliver that therapeutic into patients. We finalized our distribution network for European product launch for Illuccix, hopefully later this year. And we also got our FDA approval to start our 2 clinical trials in renal cancer in the United States. So really major milestones. And then, as I've said, really the commercial focus over the next quarter, a lot of clinical and commercial inflection points that are going to be a real interest to market and to partners. And we look forward to keeping you informed of our progress. So I'll pause there and Tim, over to you.
Thanks, Christian, and congratulations on that capital raise. It's probably going to prove to be very well timed. Can you talk about the sort of institutional support you've got on that capital raise? Traditionally biotechs see international healthcare funds come on board. There is talk that you will be included in the ASX 200. So what sort of institutional support did you see?
Yeah, very broad. A mixture of specialist and generalist investors. We've heard the speculation about making it in the 200. Clearly, that opens up the interest level to deeper pocketed generalist investors and super funds. So we had good support from that sector as well going into our capital raise. It's very personally, it was very painful to watch a capital raise of this size, executing it in these kind of market conditions. It wasn't the most fun I've ever had in my entire life. But I think it's a real testament to the quality of our shareholder base and the conviction that the company is really doing something important. It's not a hypothetical company. We're developing important medicines that we are delivering to patients around the globe every day. And so we believe very, very strongly in what the company is doing. And we think that the investor base that got behind us in the capital raise does too. And once the markets straighten themselves out, our very near-term commercial and clinical inflection points are going to be very exciting to shareholders.
And can you give us a bit more color on distribution? How do you distribute your medicines, for want of a better word? Are you looking to use partners, or is there? Do you have the ability now through this capital raise to kind of grow your own sales force?
So it's a mixture, and it depends on the territory. In the US, we do have a hybrid model where we have a sales force, but we also work with a key distribution partner, actually a couple of key distribution partners in the US, And so we leverage that as well. You know, clearly it's a tall ask for a small company to build sales forces. I mean, you know, I think investors understandably get skittish when companies talk about building sales forces. So we have a very specialist sales force that then leverages big distribution partners that have a lot of commercial firepower. In Europe, we rely entirely on a distribution network. We have a very small, you know, like can count on one hand, number of sales staff that are there essentially to support a distribution model. In Asia Pac, we're a hybrid. We sometimes, and for example, in China, we have a dedicated partner in China where they take full responsibility. In ANZ, you know, it doesn't take much effort to cover Australia and New Zealand, so we do it ourselves. So it just depends a little bit on the territory. But in Europe, although we use distributors, we are a vertically integrated manufacturing company. So we actually produce the final drug product in Europe, whereas in the US, we use contract manufacturers for doing that. So it really does depend on the market. Each market has its own nuances and we adapt accordingly.